I'm Randy Carico. I'm currently engaged at Sarasota Memorial, Atrium Wake Health, and another non-healthcare institution, a state college. So I have quite a bit of experience with PeopleSoft administration over several different OSs, Linux, AIX, Solaris, is that still around? Windows, of course. More importantly, I've been able to automate the PeopleSoft maintenance task. And this is not just the stops and starts and clearing caches. I've been able to take an entire CPU patching, middleware patching, down to just running a single command. And this is also not just on a single system, but on a heavily distributed system across many servers. So then from this session, I hope that I can help you automate some of the tasks that you have in your day-to-day life and periodic routine. Hopefully this will save you some time, which is our most valuable commodity, as well as money and possibly even manpower. So I also have a demo. It's on my laptop here. I have a VMware workstation. I have about 3 PUMs running on this, using the databases off of those. And I've stood up 2 standalone PeopleSoft app and web servers to demonstrate a method that I've been using on Linux, where you can control, many servers from a single server and make your life much, much easier. So what do we think when we hear? What do we think when we hear automation? So in our best case, we have mindless robots who who labor tirelessly with no thought about what they're doing. They are at our beck and call. They do all of our menial and laborious tasks, while we stand back and we manage the robots, maybe from work, from home, from the poolside, from the beach. And life is good. That's the best case. Then on the opposite end of the spectrum, automation could backfire. The AI becomes self-aware. AI Singularity is achieved, and our priorities have changed drastically, and making payroll is at the very bottom of our list. So when we talk about automation in PeopleSoft, we talk about scripting. And one important thing to remember is that almost everything that you do as far as patching, deploying servers can be done from the command line, which means that these can be scripted in different scripts, or possibly even one script. You can combine them, have one call another. A lot of this can be coordinated. For Unix, we have shell scripting, which is quite powerful. You can do almost anything you want with shell scripting. It's portable. I've taken it across different versions of, from Linux to Solaris to AIX. Sometimes there are little tweaks that have to be made, but you learn from that and make it more flexible. Of course, with Windows, we have the DOS command, and I like DOS just for simple scripts that I use. Doesn't have all the overhead of PowerShell, but if we want to do some more heavy lifting on Windows, PowerShell is what we go to. Now, it is indeed powerful, no pun intended. It does have some drawbacks. It's strict with permissions, especially if you try to launch this across different servers. So a lot of coordination needs to be done in order to actually use PowerShell and have it call or control other machines. Another drawback is it seems like every line I code a PowerShell I have to Google. So, but you can do a lot with it though. Of course, there are others that come with the OS and the PUMs, as Perl, JavaScript, Python, and Puppet. The important thing to note about these is that these are all readily available on your operating systems. There's nothing else to buy. These are very familiar, universal, so you could easily transfer the knowledge base of these scripts over to other installations. So then we ask ourselves the question, why would we automate? And to this, I might play devil's advocate and say, why not? In the cases where you're not really doing a lot, and I like to refer to the juice to squeeze ratio. If a lot of squeezing is needed, say you have a single installation, you don't mind doing the manual commands associated with it, then it's all in good. It doesn't take a lot of effort and time away from your day. However, if you have a widely distributed system across multiple servers, you may seriously want to consider automating in some fashion or form. It depends on if the juice is worth the squeeze in this case. Another question I hear is, why not automate? Is robots taking our jobs? So I didn't dabble much with ChatGPT, mainly because I didn't have a term paper to plagiarize. But I did have a data mover script where I was trying to move a SQL Server database over to Oracle. And so, what the heck, I'll just ask ChatGPT about it. So it did indeed come back with the data mover script. It looked like it was okay. I started reading down the lines, and I got to a line where it was not a data mover command. I Googled it. It's not a command in anything. And the rough equivalent of it would be, and then a miracle happens. And then it continues on. So you have to take all this with a grain of salt. As far as PeopleSoft administration being taken over by any kind of AI or even scripting, I don't think that's on our horizon. We have bigger fish to fry in case. So then we get to the question of why automate? Many reasons. Where do we start? Of course, work harder, not smarter. We want to reduce the time that we spend on things that require menial work. And we're talking about editing scripts, launching commands from the command line, and watching Change Assistant run. All of these things that take time from your day, these can be automated, in which case you can just launch the automation and off it goes. We want to reduce the lengthy and manual and menial tasks to a small set of scripts. So I was at a site one time. They had very complex web server setups over many domains. This was on Windows. So they had different web servers. They had a report repository, backdoor, front door, and integration broker. So these are, in order to deploy all of these, you had to manually deploy them. And in these wiki pages, they had all of these extra steps where you had to do after the fact, where you had to go in, edit all these scripts and such, and do all this menial work. So I thought to myself, if they had spent the time automating their steps instead of creating this nifty wiki page, they might be in better shape. So I dislike doing small piddly work. I like to automate things to the point where just let them run, and we don't worry about all the petty things. Another thing that this would ensure is consistency and accuracy and uniformity of standards. If you're deploying web servers, if you do it from the command line, I know you may have response files all over the place. There's some consistency there, but then if you're doing things sort of different each time, you're going to end up with a variety of things. So it will be difficult to manage. So if you use scripting, it's all the same. It's all uniform. You don't have to worry about anything sort of drifting from your anticipated code line. Also, I call this FOP, fear of patching. So whenever you mention possibly a tools patch or a POM update, everybody's always nervous, But the fact of the matter is, and very often, and we've seen this, where a CPU comes out. It has a severe vulnerability as part of it. And of course, Oracle recommends that you perform a tools patch up to the latest and greatest. Sometimes that's not always feasible. However, if you're in the cadence with a uniform automated process, it would be easy for you to stay up to date with the latest patches and such, so that you wouldn't be caught off guard, and it would make it easier for you to be able to just simply go to a new tools version. So I'm a PeopleSoft 20-something. So that means that This is a phrase I've coined for those of us who've been in the industry for 20 years or more. The important thing to note about this is that we're probably boomers and Gen Xers, and at some point in our life, we may be looking to retire. So at your organization, you're looking at someone leaving and taking with them a tremendous body of knowledge. Now, this is not to imply that a PeopleSoft administrator can simply be replaced by scripts. That's not feasible at all. But what can be done is that with automation, the knowledge of this person could be encapsulated so that maybe a junior member or an up-and-coming PeopleSoft administrator can take these scripts and easily update them so that they don't have to worry about all of the piddly bits that go on with things. And so that's what we mentioned, simplify the task so that existing staff can augment with that in the case of losing your admin. So that would mean, so that if it's simple, you can use somebody like, maybe you want to have a developer who wants to be an admin, or the OS administration. They just do Linux. With the proper coding, it could be to the point where this person can run, tools upgrades and such, so that it's not, all that invasive. Another thing that we could possibly consider is that we can keep from going to the cloud, proper automation. And what we could do, we could automate the scripts that usually take many hours for a dedicated admin to do. And so then you start to get behind your patches, and then the organization has the image that PeopleSoft is out of date. We can't keep it patched. Let's go to the cloud. However, if you're able to keep up with the latest patches with automation, this is somewhat less lucrative, but sometimes it's inevitable. But this is something to consider. So I was at an organization one time. I was a PeopleSoft administrator. We had a IT town hall meeting. So then I'm sitting in the audience with my PeopleSoft colleagues. A slide comes up and it says, PeopleSoft is going to the cloud. So we look over at each other and I'm like, that's the first I've heard about it. But it does happen. And so what happens is you end up, a lot of people start turning in their notices, because, why wouldn't they? What they're trying to do is going away. So that does happen, but you do have some people there in the system who want to be cloud experts. But one thing to consider is that PeopleSoft will possibly, more than likely, persist past your cloud go-live date, and possibly almost indefinitely. When the cloud implementers come in, they throw out some date, and everybody, scoffs and snickers and such. But believe it or not, for the most part, they do make these dates. The reason is they're not taking forward your customizations. They're taking forward only about a year's worth of history. And when you ask them about it, what about our historical data? I'm like, well, you have PeopleSoft, but you'll have some people come in, historical data people. They'll put this in some kind of store so that you can get to it. I don't see that happening very often, but it does. And so the thing is, unless your historical data store goes live with your cloud implementation, PeopleSoft will remain up, and if you shut it down, your phone will continue to ring. When you have an exodus of your staff, when your admin leaves, a lot of your developers, with automation, they can possibly step in, or as I mentioned, you could turn it over to your OS operators, other admins. They could run these scripts that can perform the upgrades that you need to keep PeopleSoft running in this lame duck state, but then possibly even into indefinite proportions. And so that's where we reach the state which I call Perpetual Sunset. So PeopleSoft persists in the legacy form containing historical data. For how long? Who knows? It could be forever. So I had to rework this slide. So I met a colleague here yesterday when we flew in, and she was telling me that they went to the cloud. Their PeopleSoft system is still up, and they're okay with it. They worked out some sort of agreement with Oracle where they can easily keep up with the PeopleTools patches and such. So, everything is great. But the problem is, a lot of times these fall to the wayside. You see, you're sitting on unsupported release PeopleSoft and older PeopleTools, older database levels, and eventually your operating system ages out. So one thing that I've done, and your mileage may vary, and you have to carefully consider this. I've been able to take an older version of PeopleSoft PeopleTools. Now this was an 8.5.1. And it had the older HCM, I think it was HCM 8.9, Financials 9.0. I was able to successfully upgrade the tools to this straight from 8.5.1 to 8.6.0. And everyone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't find anywhere in the Oracle documentation that links the tools version to the application version. And I'm sure there's some applied things. You're going to lose, like going from 8.5.1 to 8.6.0, you're going to lose crystal reports. Search is going to be all out of whack. There's a lot of things that are geared towards, the latest application level. But in a legacy capacity, it's possible that this is all you need in order to present this historical data store. So then you could have your 8.0 HCM running on PeopleTools 8.6.0. Then you can easily patch this. You can patch this every time a CPU comes out. You can keep this up to date. It persists forever. And welcome to the world of Perpetual Sunset. And again, with that, your mileage may vary. It depends on the functionality that the users are expecting, but that is an alternative to going to an historical data store. And like I mentioned, these things are slow to come about. And a lot of times they fail when the implementers don't really interact with the users and find out exactly what they want. And I've even seen some people suggest, well, let's just have the Oracle database up. They can query from it. That's where all the data is. I'm like, well, why would you need PeopleSoft if you go straight to the Oracle database? So that's problematic. Good historical data implementers will probably know what to pull from it and present. But the other option, as I mentioned, maybe upgrade your old legacy systems to the latest and greatest so that you can continue patching them. So as far as automation, what can be automated? And again, I play devil's advocate and say what can't be. Well, and that's when we need to consider what I mentioned as the juice to squeeze ratio. If we have a lot of manual tasks that we have to labor on, not necessarily every day, but possibly every month as far as patching and such, you may want to consider automation with this. If you need a lot of juice and a lot of squeezing, sometimes automating this is something that would be desirable. We have the tedious manual script edits, including response file creation. That can be automated. So instead of keeping a body or a collection of response files for each of your domains, what you can do is gear your script to actually create the response file in line with the code from certain parameters that may be at the top of the particular script, or you could have another method that I'm going to speak about, which is keeping control files, which have the metrics for all of your systems and such as web server. You have your Weblogic ports, Java heap, and so forth. But with the automation scripts, you wouldn't need these response files lying around. It will create these for you based on parameters. For Change Assistant, I went down the path of attempting to automate a Change Assistant, but you know how often Change Assistant fails. Even if you have a clean run through and a recent refresh copy, there's always things that happen. And if you were to automate this and one of those occur, what would you do? You'd have to do the equivalent of what you do in the GUI, which is dig through the log files and find out what the heck's going on and then restart it. So in this case, it's like I just soon have the Change Assistant there and present. It's it gives you the graphical interface. If it fails, it'll help you along a little bit better. So that's one thing that I haven't done, but with some careful work, you might be able to just do a change assistant call against a package that you have inline in a script, and you know, the good Lord willing, no errors, you could possibly automate this with no problem. Also, refreshes can be automated. I don't know how many of you might have a nightly refresh, but this is a very desirable thing to have. Many times when we implement this at a site, the users get very hooked on it, and if there's any kind of problem with it, if it doesn't come up, you know, they'll start, you know, your phone will start ringing, and they'll come back and say, how did we do without this? But this process can be done lights out. So every morning you coordinate with your database, you refresh it from production. In your automation, you have the scripts that prep the database to look like your refreshed database. Run anything else that you need to do, and in the morning your users come in, the refresh database is there, and you have a fresh copy of production that they can play around with. Now, another thing that I've automated is CPU patching, and this is from the top down. Tuxedo patching, rolling patches, Weblogic, Java, and Elasticsearch. I was able to come up with a script that applies the latest Elasticsearch patches. It was a bit difficult. I had to sort of jury rig it, but I was able to get that to work. But these tasks here, and as you know, when you apply them, there's lots of steps. The stack patch bundle really helps, and that's what I use. I parse through it and you know, apply everything that it has in there. And one of the gotchas too is the OPatch version. It seems like they're always changing that thing. So with the automation that I've done, I include that as well. So it checks to see if OPatch needs to be updated. It'll shut down all the services that are associated with it. It checks OPatch. What I've been doing, and I would like to talk to some of you about it, I've been uninstalling the existing Weblogic patches as well as Tuxedo. I don't know how many of you do that. I don't know if you just leave the patches there and patch over top, but I've had the best luck of simply uninstalling these and then coming in and installing the latest CPU. So with the automation that I have an automation that will do all of this in one script, everything. It rolls back all your Weblogic patches, gets rid of your Java, replaces the new one. The Tuxedo, we haven't seen rolling patches that are, you know, really critical here. There was that one 087 that had a vulnerability, but I think we're up to 99 with 859. Sometimes I don't apply the Tuxedo patch, and that's where, you know, I'd like to you know, confer with you guys and see what you're doing with your best practices. Even with a tools patch, most of a tools patch can be automated. The one exception is there's some pauses within it where you have to switch things out, but of course the change assistant, you know, I just let that run. Could be automated. Is the juice worth the squeeze? You know, who knows? Your mileage may vary. Another tedious task that we have is the deployment and redeployment of the app servers, process schedulers, and especially the web servers. And you know how tedious these can be, especially if you have to go in and edit your scripts. You have to edit Weblogic XML. You have to do all of this tedious stuff. Sometimes you doubt yourself and go back and look. Automate this, and you don't have to worry about it. It's great. Another thing you might not know that can be automated is the Weblogic console settings, where you have to go in and set the private keys and such. You know, traditionally people had to go into the console manually and do all of this, but you can do this with what do they call it? Weblogic scripting language, something like that. And this can be incorporated in your script. You can do all of your change assistant, SSL private key stuff, a number of other things. You can look, well, you have to dig, you have to Google it, but there's commands that you can use that mimic about everything you can do in the console. Sometimes it's desirable to disable the non-SSL port. I have that automated too, where we use it. So that's very helpful to do. Also, the PUM installation, I've automated that. It's for the most part, it's you know, it's not too tedious, but being a geek, I don't like to put in all of these little, initial things where you specify your name and your passwords and such. So I do have a script, works on both PowerShell and in Linux, that you can put your parameters in the top. You just kick it off. And another thing I like to do, when you download your patches from Oracle, if you're updating them, if you're extracting them and putting these all into files and unzipping them, that's not necessary. You can do this with automation. So when I say it does everything, it even explodes all of the zip files off to a temporary folder. You don't have to worry about it. It uses these, it deletes them after the fact. So the only thing that you're storing are the files that come from Oracle, to avoid confusing. So some of the techniques that I use, some of these are sort of trivial. Highly recommend decoupled environments. I have been down the path of undecoupling one of the older environments. It's a painstaking process. I did it manually. I tried to match it up with, and who knows if it's right. If it works, it's fine, but that can be tedious. But I highly recommend, if you're going to automate things, to go to the decoupled environments. As I mentioned, your script should do all the unzipping of your files. You shouldn't have to have all of these, exploded files lying around. They have clutter. If they're stored in the original Oracle zip format, and you can make folders for these to readily describe them, it'll make your system a lot cleaner. One thing we can do as far as automation, with the response files, and this I did mention, this is where you don't need to keep all of these .rsp files lying around, or maybe in folders corresponding to each of yours. If you can set up the parameters, whether in your script or through control files, which we'll visit here, this will be, you can code this to where this is a thing of the past. This thing will build your response files so that you can easily automate the tasks. One of the things that we want to do, and you may do this already, but keep your PS homes and PS app homes custom free, and I'm talking everything. One of the things that you're familiar with probably are the fonts folder that resides directly under PS Home. That can be easily moved out in your PS App Store config and PSPRCS config. You can tell it to reside in another environment. If you can, use Cust Home for any of these tasks. And I'm sure you've seen this one before, where in your psconfig.sh, it's kind of squirrely because in the code, what they do is they assume that if you're in the directory, then that's where they run psconfig from. So, and then most of us have to go into psconfig when we install a new tools version and make a change to set PS home, instead of before this. So what I do, I have a wrapper script, and if you set just some basic things, and I found that setting these three variables properly, then with your script, you CD to where you want your PS home to be, then call psconfig with no customizations in it, then it will do the config the way that it should. So that's another trick that I use to keep any kind of customizations out of the tools home. Very often we can forget these, and we'll get all confused, or it's just another little piddly manual thing that we have to worry about. And again, another thing that I've seen before, the xdo compile, the xdo file, it comes in by default under PS Home. But what you can do, of course, and you may be doing this already, place this in a Cust Home and update your AppServe and PSPRCS accordingly, and you would have eventually zero customizations that you have to make to your people tools. So this is sort of a working demo that I have worked up, and I do have this implemented at about three sites so far, to varying degrees of scale. One of which is a state college, which has several campuses, and they're forever adding campuses. They also have several different environments. Of course, for one campus, they'll have a dev, a test, possibly train, QAT, dev 2, dev 3. You know how that is. If you're trying to manage a site and we're talking literally about 60 servers, you can see how this could be quite daunting, especially with reconfiguring or redeploying many of your many of the tasks that you do, CPUs and such. One method that I use, and this is to have a central control server, and specifically this is in Linux. And this server houses all of the scripts. From this server, we establish an SSH trust to all the supported machines, which are the web servers, app servers, and so forth. Now, before you do that, and before you consider this, definitely check with your systems administrator. I haven't had any pushback with the 3 sites, and they're very security oriented. You just have to be careful. Definitely work with them to see how this this might work for your organization. One thing I do, so the scripts aren't contained just on the control server. What I do, I distribute these periodically to all of the servers so that they can be autonomous. So you can even run these scripts from one of the single servers and not be on the control server. They need to be to the point where if something were to happen, you don't, from the control server, you simply run the command from the repository that's been updated from the control server. So they're independent, they're autonomous. We don't have to worry about just doing everything from this one control server. So a little demo that I have set up. I have some pumps. I set up just a blank Linux server. I'll call this PS Linux PS0. It sits at the top. Here we have, in my demo, we have a web server and an app server. I'm connecting to databases, which are actually PUMs, but I'm interacting with those. Now, this is just a demo, but this could scale, to a very high limit of servers. So at the site I'm at now, I have about 60 servers underneath a single control server. You may want to break this up. You may want to have a dev and a production. This one serves everything. Have to be careful. It depends on your infrastructure, if you have buy-in from everything, but this can easily scale. You can easily set this up to control and control many servers from this one different location. So this brings up the concept of control files. So what I have on the main server is tab delimited files, which have all the metrics that we need for the different elements of that we're trying to administer. This is in a normalized format. So then we have files for app servers, we have files for web servers, we have files for environments, and we'll touch on these here in a bit, a file for the machines and so forth. These are used by the control server to stop and start, do the mundane things, but there's many uses you can do for this. You can create scripts from the control server that can reach out to all of these servers. So then you could get an inventory of all the patches that you have on all the servers. You can stop and start, of course. This also controls the login. So when you log into the individual servers, your login menu is controlled or built from your control file. And you're probably familiar before with Linux, how you would, you log in, you have to set all these environment variables. You may have some scripting though, but this does it all for you. So when you log in, you have a menu that is generated from a single control file. Of course, as I mentioned, this provides scalable, intuitive, and it's uniform across all the servers. And we minimize the editing of the primary scripts. Most of your work is done in the control files. If you want to update your PeopleTools version, update it in the control file, propagate that to the rest of your servers, log out, log in, and it sets all of those values for you. And even when you're doing a tools patch deploy or something, you could do that within your script in the main line. You've probably done this already, supporting multiple tools versions on a single Linux server. What we see is, we haven't seen this in quite a while. Tuxedo hasn't changed, but Weblogic does between the tools versions. So we can easily support multiple versions on one machine, or we can spread it out ever how you want to do that. So the control files that I mentioned, this is one that controls, say, all the environments that I have on this. The environments being, so in this case, These are ones that don't exist in my, my current definition, but you can see more of those. But at the moment, I'm hosting these two environments. They are at two different tools levels at the same time. I have an app server that houses the app servers for both of these, and then a web server that houses both. So you can see then how you can easily change your tools version, what you see at the menu when you log in, just by making changes to this control file. Correspondingly with that, depending on the tools version that you have, the Weblogic version might change. So if you're 8.6.0, you want to upgrade to 14 and so forth. But this is what I have here. I have these two environments set up, coexisting on the same machine, all driven from the control file. And this is the one for the environments. Next, we have a web server control file, and this could get more complicated. I don't know how many of you have different web server domains. This one particular institution, as I mentioned, divides this out quite a bit. So we have all of those. We don't have to, we can list everything we have, or in this case, I just have the dev and the test. I don't have prod on there, but this can exist only if it's needed. So of course, the metrics that we need for our WebLogic, we need our ports, we need different things, the web profile that it's using, Java heap and so forth. You can add to this, you can update this in your script to where you can minimize any kind of editing that you do. Let me go back here. This was the environment control file. Let me go back. This one here? Yeah, the question was, you know, we had these other environments here that are not actually implemented on my server, but they may be implemented on other servers. So these can exist. The scripting knows when you log in which environments are hosted on it, and it can present menus where, well, you may want to create them on that one machine. So those exist there. In this demo now, we just have the dev and the test. And that was our environment control file. Let me go into presentation mode here. Okay. The next one we have our web server. We did go over this. All the metrics that you need to create your web server. You may want to add more. It depends. For this particular demo, these are the ones that I use. Next, we have our app servers. If you have app servers hosted on it, we have the domain that corresponds to it. This one site breaks it out. It has a app server domain for front door, for they call a timetable, different things like that. But for the most part, what I'm seeing is you have a domain named HCM Dev. You have your Tuxedo domain as HCM Dev as well. But this is flexible where you can host multiple Tuxedo installations for one instance. For the machines, this is a control file that lists all of the machines that the scripting hosts. So in this case, we just have these two here. What we're doing in this demo, we want to know what the base home is, where the top level folder is that has the tools and so forth. Also, this is has a login specific to it. This is PSHCM. So you might want to log in as a different user depending on the different servers that you have. And of course, we have the region. We have two HCMs here, but you can include, who knows, ELM, financials, and so forth. So this is the login menu that I mentioned. Now this is built from metrics in the control files on the master server. So when I log into this particular web server, and this is a little scant, of course you can dress it up, but what we see here, built from the control files, based on this one web server, we know that these two environments exist, the web servers exist on this one machine. We have an option to have a QAT, but we don't have that. So then if you want to, and what this does, of course, it sets all the parameters for you. So then suppose we selected HCM Dev, or test in this case. We see that this is a web server. We have it on 8.6.0. App Home and Custom doesn't really apply to web servers. Of course, I do install Tuxedo here. I like the PS Admin to start. And this is our Weblogic home, which can vary based on your tools version. So correspondingly, had we selected HCM Dev, we see that it is 858, and we have the app home and custom set up for it, other metrics, and it also has the regular Tuxedo that we have. For our app server, it's correspondingly the same. It knows which app servers are on it. You can select either one, and it sets all of your environment accordingly. So this is a script that I came up with that uses the control files. You run this individually on the individual servers based on the metrics that you have. This makes a sweep through all of the system, and you can get an inventory of everything PeopleSoft that is running on this particular server. All of this is driven from the control files that I mentioned, and also the existing domains that we have. This is an example of my app server here. As we see, the two domains are up. It also lists the other metrics that might be interesting to you. JSL ports, the tools version. Sometimes you get into shared memory hell, and it does list the IPC key in case you want to try to clean things up manually. Of course, rebooting will address that. Other metrics that it has, the two homes that I have hosted on this server have a 860 and an 858, whether or not it's Unicode. In this case here, we like to keep the JRE file under PS Home up to date. So this tells where this resides. And I do create a link to that, and I would be interested in chatting with some of you guys how you handle this. And to your site may come up. We had an issue where the ephemeral ports weren't set right, and this site was using ports in the 5,000 range. So what was happening, the ephemeral range was set to 0, meaning that every so often we tried to start this domain, one of the app servers wouldn't start up. This was the one that was on the 5,000, in the 5,000 range. The ephemeral ports are the ones that the system, just sort of grabs and then they go away. It was grabbing ports below 1,000. It was from 0 up. So then once we bump this up to a higher value, 10,000 might be okay. It depends on what you want, but just to be careful. But anyway, though, what this tells us is that if we have some problems that have been plaguing us every time we set something up, this thing seems to recur, this particular report that we can run, it can identify things like that, and we can make sure that we don't stumble over that again. Another metric, the shared memory. If you have everything down and you see anything shared memory specific to your PeopleSoft account, you probably have trouble. Try to change your, try to track it down with IPCS or just reboot. Now this is the corresponding report file that I have on my web domains. So this is the first part of that report. So we see here we have all of our servers here that are hosted on this machine. In this case, we have the dev, the BD, has all the metrics that we have, the Java heap that's actually on this system here, cookie domain, buffingo.net, all the servers that it runs on. This particular one just goes against one app server, and it lists the port and the web profile that it's using. For test, we see similar metrics, but notice that this one is using two different app servers for redundancy and load balancing. You can have a mixture of any of these. But as we see, these are all very valuable metrics. This tells us if the system's up, what ports it's using, everything like that. And correspondingly also to our app server does have lists our PS homes, where it mentions all the similar metrics that we saw with our app, the app servers, JRE version and so forth. The second part of this is also has the PS homes, Java version, so forth. The Tuxedo version, which I install on the web servers just for PS admin. More importantly, this has all the metrics for the Weblogic installation. This has this does a dump, the OPatch dump of all of the patch levels that you have on your web servers. Note that there are two on here. They have two separate versions of these patches. So very valuable things can be gleaned from this method. Does anybody have anything specific?
So I see that you're mostly Linux. Were you using like remote PowerShell remote execution for the Windows boxes, or were you using like CPAU or some of the other tools? Is that what you were using?
Yes, that's correct. The question was, what was I using as far as patching on Windows, and definitely PowerShell. I need something that's procedural. You know, you can do it with DOS, but it's so convoluted. You can do if statements, you know, manual, just sort of piddly stuff like that. But for heavy lifting, definitely do use PowerShell.
So we were a Bitcoin hack site. You know,
yeah.
And they are really gun shy about remote execution.
Yeah.
So have you had any discussions about that, or have you seen a big pushback for remote execution across servers for that reason, or do you kind of have a bit of a policy relationship where it's like, hey, we're going to limit it to this OU or something else?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it was any kind of security pushback as far as implementing PowerShell and remoting into other servers. I'm a Linux geek, and so for the most part, I've been on Linux. My engagement with Sarasota Memorial, they're Windows-based. They have Microsoft SQL Server. It comes down to the juice to squeeze ratio. You know, I don't have that many servers that I patch simultaneously, so I do have one central repository for my scripts, but I end up doing them, you know, almost on individual servers. And if you want to scale that more so, we could have a conversation with your infrastructure team and have them guide us and let us know how we can achieve something like that.
That looks like
yeah, yeah, no. Well, I do have a script that is PowerShell. We have our patching where the servers are patched automatically on one day. They sit there, and then after hours, bounce all of them, put them into effect. So I do have a script that will bounce all the servers. That's PowerShell. It seems to work. On the control server, I have the same admin password that I use for all the other servers, so that works. But it could be more complex with PowerShell, most definitely. Absolutely, thank you. Please engage with us at NRC Consulting, and we'll see you know, how we can partner with you to accomplish what you're trying to do. So, okay, so that was that's about all I have. So, are there any more questions?
Yeah. So, what exactly is rolling back the Weblogic or Tuxedo projects?
Mm-hmm. So when I went to this site, that's what they were doing. And your mileage may vary, and that's where I would like to get some input on this. They like to roll back those patches. Now, what you've seen before, if your O-patch isn't right, when you try to install the latest CPU, it'll have some sort of conflict with what's already installed. So to avoid that, you know, just roll everything back and then apply the latest. Now, I would love feedback on this. You know, is it possible that that it's not truly cumulative and there's something back in the past that we really need? I don't know, and that's a very good question. So let me get some feedback on that, and let me know if you know anybody that's actually doing that. So.
I mean, I've read so many patches and I never actually, well, I didn't have to roll back because of the conflict, but
yeah.
recent ones, there was like butter smooth.
Yeah, and I believe that has something to do with the O-patch version. If you've noticed, they've been changing that fairly often. So what I believe is that every time they make it smarter to where it knows and doesn't have these conflicts. So that's, I mean, maybe it's starting to work now. Maybe they've got their act together. You know, I'd like to hope so. So, but yeah, anyway, any more questions?
Yeah, one more.
Yeah.
So in the application server, when you try to shut them down or something, let's just say the script hangs and the application server doesn't go down. How do you handle that?
Yeah, that's a good question. The question was, when you shut down your app servers, sometimes often they hang. Now, I've seen this done at different sites. One site, they will do a shutdown abort instead of a shutdown. That's supposed to clean everything out. So at that site, they do that, and then after that, I'll do like a regular shutdown, and then I'll do the IPC clearing of the shared memory too. I haven't seen that problem recently, but it can happen. And maybe you can find out what the root cause is and maybe address that. But yeah, it is a problem, you know, and it could jam up everything, you know, especially if you're doing a lights out rolling bounce or something late at night. If it doesn't come up, you know, you've got trouble and your phone starts ringing.
You're doing an asynchronous shutdown, and the end of the script writes a file. It sounds really dumb. So it writes a file that says done.txt.
Yeah, that's good.
And then, it's a counter, right? So it's really dumb. But that was a way of getting around it. Sometimes it's even waiting for you to hit enter to continue. You know what I mean? It just hangs.
Yeah.
So after 5 minutes, if it hasn't completed, it's doing a send mail and saying, hey, this shit's broke. You know, and you go, okay, cool, and that's your key to go look at it. So,
Right.
And that's just a dumb fix. I'm sure there's a better way.
Well, I have seen something more elaborate. This was coded on a Unix. You shut things down, you put it in the background, and then you have a little timer that runs and checks periodically. Is it down? Is it down? Is it down? If it fails to shut down in X number of minutes or seconds, it kills it. You know, that's more elaborate. Hopefully that's not needed, but you know, that's something that can happen. You know.
How much time are we going to spend coding on the 5% problem? You know?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. Okay,
Cool.
great.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you bet.